The coastline around the UK is littered with unexploded wartime ordnance, so it's inevitable that occasionally one will be picked up by an unsuspecting fishing boat. Take this vessel for example. In December 2020 she was hauling in a string of pots when the crew noticed that there was more tension than usual on the line. Now it's common for this to happen as it's easy for a potting line to snag on boulders and things, so you usually just keep pulling until it comes free. On this occasion however, the result was a massive underwater explosion, throwing the vessel and its crew clear out of the water, simultaneously knocking out all propulsion and electrical power. With the engine room flooding and numerous injured crew members, the skipper activated the EPIRB and ordered the crew to abandon ship. Fortunately, they weren't too far from the coast, so were quickly picked up by a nearby offshore support vessel before being transferred to hospital. Their abandoned vessel eventually stabilised sitting low in the water, after which she was towed back to port for investigators to try and work out what had happened. The distortions on the outside of the hull were consistent with an external explosion, but there wasn't anything to indicate the actual cause. Meanwhile, another vessel returned to the accident site to recover the remaining pots from the seabed. Inside one of them, they found a fragment of metal contaminated with TNT. Further analysis of its size and composition showed it to be consistent with a German-made air-dropped high-explosive bomb manufactured between 1940 and 1942. It would have been around 1 metre long, with a diameter of about 40 centimetres, containing approximately 123 kilos of explosives made from TNT and ammonium nitrate. What they now believe happened was that the explosive got caught by the line or a pot and dragged along the seabed. Due to the additional weight, the line came tight, bringing the explosive directly underneath the vessel. Once there, it probably got caught on something like a boulder, causing it to detonate. The explosion caused a pressure wave and air bubble that struck the underside of the fishing vessel, throwing them into the air and distorting the hull in the process. That distortion damaged the engine mounts and sheared off one of the water intakes, resulting in a complete loss of power and flooding. Luckily, the watertight bulkheads held, containing the damage and allowing the vessel to be towed back to port. But obviously, that does open up more questions. Why was a World War II explosive there, and given that it was there, where else might they be, and who else could find them? It turns out, working out the source is relatively easy. During World War II, it was common for Allied and German aircraft to jettison unused explosives at sea after aborted bombing runs. It was also common for ordnance to land in the water after missing a nearby target like a ship. This means that around the UK there are an estimated 500,000 pieces of unexploded ordnance on the sea floor. As for who could find them, we've already mentioned fishing vessels, but the other ships worth mentioning are dredgers. They literally dredge up the seabed, so it's inevitable that anything in the seabed will be dredged up too. Most of the time, dredgers work to maintain the depths in ports and harbours, so they're often only dredging up material that's been relatively recently deposited. Theoretically, all of that should be clear, as you'd assume any ordnance would have already been found. The more hazardous work comes during harbour expansion or other building work when you're working in areas that haven't been touched since the war. In 2017, for example, while undertaking expansion work in Portsmouth Harbour to accommodate the new Queen Elizabeth class carriers, a dredger found the same sort of bomb that our fishing vessel encountered, a HE-SC-250 air-dropped bomb. This one didn't explode though, so when it was spotted at the surface they called in a bomb disposal team who took it out to sea for a controlled explosion. Clearly these things can be found anywhere, so are we seriously just saying that finding them is simply down to luck? Well, in a way, yes. There are no records of the locations of where those estimated 500,000 bombs might be. Left undisturbed, they probably won't cause anyone any issues, but what if you need to disturb an area? We've already mentioned accidental disturbances like fishing and dredging, but what about construction? Maybe you want to construct a new wind farm. Well, it turns out part of the process for offshore construction involves detailed underwater surveys of the entire area. Specialist vessels use a combination of techniques to look for signs of ordnance on the sea floor, and then send down ROVs to check it out and possibly set charges for a controlled detonation. One such survey was conducted for Dudgeon Wind Farm, right next to the spot where the fishing vessel at the beginning of the video hooked an explosive. That survey did find numerous potential targets and carried out a number of controlled detonations. The thing is, these surveys come with a massive financial cost, so it's just not possible to carry them out unless they're funded as part of a development project. Even when they are, of course, there's no guarantee that they'll find everything, just like the dredger in Portsmouth Harbour. What we can do, however, is use a bit of logic to try and think about where these sorts of things are most likely to be. We know they came from the war, so there's a good chance that you'll find them in areas where explosives were most heavily used at the time. This could be near naval installations, such as Portsmouth Harbour, or under flight paths used for bombing runs, just like the area around Dudgeon Wind Farm. Unfortunately though, all we can do is make a bit of a guess, because in the absence of surveying the entire seabed with ROVs, it's just not possible to know for sure. If you're interested in reading into this topic a little more, I've linked the accident report about the fishing vessel down in the description below. Otherwise, you can come and join us in the community where the director's commentary for this video has just gone live. Check the description to find out more.